Hey there! Welcome to a remake of sorts of a video I did previously on this channel called The Rise and Fall of RoboCop. This is in a lot of ways, it's a follow-up video, but it's also technically a remake. I wanted to do another video like this anyway, not only just to have an upgrade in terms of video and audio, because the video and audio quality on that video is not the best. But also, the 30th anniversary of the film that started it all, RoboCop, is upon us, and I thought the perfect way to celebrate that, and I'm so excited, I'm losing my voice. I can't. I'm just like I'm just like I get to talk about RoboCop, yay! It's just anyway. I thought the perfect way to celebrate that, to celebrate the 30th anniversary, is to discuss the franchise as a whole. There were also things that I didn't really talk about in that video that I want to discuss with you guys in this video. There's also some opinions of mine that have changed a little bit in regards to certain parts of the franchise. And also, I want to talk about ways and things that I feel could be done to resurrect the franchise the right way, to bring back the franchise and have people respect RoboCop again, and to appreciate RoboCop for his strengths, for the character's qualities that are still really prevalent to this day, the qualities that people still really appreciate and love about this character. I would like to let people know ways that we might be able to bring this character back, but in a way that is going to not only be respectful to the source material, the original, and to its fan base, but also maybe bring in some new kind of things, ideas out there as well, but in a way that doesn't seem like they're just ignoring what made the franchise work in the first place, what made the character so iconic. To bring the badass back to RoboCop, because right now he's just ass, and it's not really the character that sucks, it's what has been done with the character recently that sucks. But anyway, as you all know, RoboCop is a character that first debuted in the 1987 film of the same name, directed by Paul Verhoeven. I'm not going to give my thoughts on the film. I did that in a video already called Why I Love RoboCop, and I did another review of it. I have a review from back in the few years ago that's pretty lengthy if you want to hear my thoughts on RoboCop. Mainly what I want to talk about is why did this film become as successful as it ended up being? Why did RoboCop, almost instantaneously upon its release, become a big part of popular culture and become a household name? And also, why did this franchise, as a result, reach the soaring heights that it ended up reaching? Why did RoboCop rise? I think there's multiple factors that go into this. I think one of them is the timing. This is pretty soon after The Terminator, another really successful sci-fi action movie that had dealt with a cyborg, and that it was an action film and so on. So The Terminator was fresh on people's minds. So it was the perfect timing for a film like RoboCop. You could tell that Orion felt the same way because they used the Terminator theme heavily in the trailer for RoboCop. But I think that's also because they didn't have Basil Polidoros' excellent score available yet to use in the trailers. So I definitely think it's a case of timing. That's for sure. Also, I think another large part as to why it was so successful is the direction by Paul Verhoeven. This was a guy who was the perfect guy for the job. This was a guy who knew how to make an action movie that was action packed, but at the same time felt unique, felt different. He was the perfect guy for this job, for a film that was a hard sell and a film that was really a very difficult film to pull off, with its tone, with its mix of different styles, with its blending of commercial parodies and news breaks with a common narrative. These are things that are not that very easy to do. And without the right director, I don't think the film would have been as good as it was, and also would not have been as well acclaimed by fans at the time or fans to this day, and it definitely would not have done as well in the box office. Because people came back and saw it again and again because of the overall quality of the film. And it was an appealing film not only to the people who loved action films, but also to people who loved science fiction. Because it had those elements in it that really did appeal to all different types of genres. You know, all different types of genre files, of people who liked different genres of film. It had a wide spread when it comes to its audience. And of course, that's in large part also because of the screenplay by Michael Miner and Ed Neurmeyer, who wanted to make a Judge Dredd film, but they couldn't get the rights, so they decided to make up their own character, and that ultimately became RoboCop, and they ended up creating a character that in many ways, for a lot of people, is actually even more memorable than Judge Dredd. Or at least has the same lasting legacy as Dredd. You can see a lot of influences from Dredd in RoboCop. I mean, with the social commentary, with the ultra violence, with the design of RoboCop himself. It's a very distinct correlation between the two. And it's a great thing to take inspiration from, that's for sure. I also think part of the film's success is also that it is a very politically sort of incorrect film. It doesn't pull any punches. It doesn't flinch. It doesn't have any sequences or any moments in it where it feels like it had to hold back. I think that appealed to a lot of people as well, especially during a time period where you had a lot of intense, gory, kind of crazy movies around the time. Also, a lot of people hated yuppies in 1987, so it was kind of a wish fulfillment fantasy to see a bunch of yuppies get screwed over. And also, of course, you got to give a lot of credit for the film's success and for the character being so ingrained in society and in pop culture to the character itself. I mean, the name alone is a great name. It just rolls off the tongue. RoboCop. I mean, that's a great sounding title. I mean, sometimes a title goes a long way, and this is one of those examples. It's right up there with the Terminator. I mean, it's almost synonymous with the Terminator. That's why RoboCop vs. Terminator was such a dream versus matchup when people, kept talking about it. That's why the comic came out and was pretty successful, and so was the video games, because people were like, man, I want to see this fight. RoboCop versus Terminator. But anyway, the name was definitely part of it. But it's also the character. I mean, it's a very sympathetic character. You feel for Alex Murphy. He was blown away in brutal, gory, violent fashion in a way that is just shocking to witness. And immediately you sympathize with him. When he's brought back to life as this combination of steel and screws and machinery and wiring and all of this other kind of stuff, you feel for him too, because he's not only died, but now he's brought back to life, and he's this Frankenstein monster, this monstrosity, this mix between machine and man, where he's more machine than he really is man. And it really does bring up this question of what makes us human. and it shows you the importance of memories and of the human spirit. And is that what makes us human? Is what we remember, the memories that we have, our spirit? Is that what makes us human? Is that what makes us who we are? There's a lot of great things about identity as well. He had his identity stripped away from him. He had his life stripped away from him. He was given his life back inside this machine. But is that really life? And he had his identity wiped. But then things start to come back. And then you sympathize with him because you want him to get revenge against Boddicker and company for killing him and for screwing him over. But you also sympathize with him because of what he's become. And you want the best for Murphy, even in the current state that he's in. It's one of the most sympathetic characters I can think of in cinema, which is another reason why I love this character so much, because I connect with Murphy on a deep emotional level, which I can't say that for the Terminator. I can't say that for any of the other T's that are in that franchise. But I can say that about Murphy, about RoboCop. That says a lot. And of course, Peter Weller is a big reason why all that works out as well as it does either, because he's just a amazing, stellar actor and a great performer, and he really does pull this role off in a way that honestly is Oscar worthy. For a guy to do all this in a really heavy, hot suit where he can barely even see, and he only has to emote with the lower half of his face, and is still able to make it a believable performance, and he doesn't just look silly like a guy just walking around in a robot suit. That's pretty impressive. But yeah, the character itself is a very likable character. It also helps too that the design is iconic by Rob Bottin. It's a great looking design of the suit. And it's sleek, it's badass, it looks futuristic. It's a really cool looking suit. It does take a lot of elements from a lot of cars at the time, and it uses them to really great. I'm trying to think of the right word here, but it uses them to, the great delight of a lot of people who see the film, and a lot of people who love the design of this character. It's a really cool looking suit. That's another thing. People are drawn to the film too because they're like, wow, that's a really cool effect. I like the design of the suit. RoboCop looks really cool. Compare the design of RoboCop in this, or even the sequel, or even RoboCop 3 versus the design of RoboCop in the reboot. I mean, here it's a lot more likable. It's a lot more memorable. Another thing that's really something that I feel the success of the franchise and the success of the first film hinged upon is the marketing campaign. Great trailers, TV spots, but it's that poster. I mean, the poster for RoboCop is one of the most iconic movie posters ever. I'm not exaggerating that either. And it's not just because I'm a fan of RoboCop. I really do feel that way. I think it's one of the best posters ever made. And it sells the film just by the poster. Like the poster, you see the poster and you want to see the movie. The way everything is structured, the way everything is situated, the artwork is really well done. The design is fantastic. The image of RoboCop stepping out of his police car with one foot down on the ground, staring straight at you, and then taglines, part man, part machine, all cop, RoboCop, the future of law enforcement. I mean, the poster just sells the movie perfectly. And that's something that is really overlooked nowadays. Back then, posters could sell a film and make it a bigger hit than it would have been without it. And this is definitely one of those examples, in my opinion. I think the poster is every bit of a reason why RoboCop was such a surprise hit for Orion in 1987. and why a lot of people still remember the film, or at least even people who haven't seen the movie, they know of RoboCop, they know the character because they know of the poster. It's a very iconic poster. It's right up there for posters like Back to the Future and Ghostbusters and so on. So, marketing was a big reason why the film was as successful as it was. Now, the film was a decent sized success when it came out. Made it $53.4 million in the US on a $13 million budget. On July 17th, 1987 is when it came out. So the film is now 30 years old, and for a film that's 30 years old, holds up really well. I really do feel that way. It's considered by a lot of critics to be one of the best films of its genre for a reason. And in a lot of ways, it was ahead of its time with the way it talked about the corporations taking over the government and stuff like that. And it's still a very unique film that is very one of a kind with the way it's structured, the way things are set up, and it's a great film. It's a classic. It's considered a classic by many for a reason. And I think that it is a film that will continue as the years go by to just age like a fine wine. So, even after the success of the 1987 film, Orion realized they had a potential franchise on their hands. Which is, of course, I mean, that's to be expected when you have any company that has this kind of thing. Like a surprise hit, a marketable character. But the problem is Orion, knowing that they were not in the best of financial straits at the time, and they were also really greedy. They wanted more money, as do most studios. They made the unfortunate decision to milk RoboCop for every last drop that they could get from him immediately after the film's success in theaters and on home video. You had a VHS board game for RoboCop, and that was just the beginning, because you had things like they made a deal with Kenner, and Kenner produced this toy line called RoboCop and the Ultra Police, with these toys that fired cap guns, which probably annoyed all the parents around that time period. There was also a cartoon that was co-produced by Marvel, and it was one of the first cartoons. I think it was the first cartoon to ever be based on an R-rated film that was marketed towards kids. I mean, this cartoon was marketed towards kids. So were the toys. The toy line didn't do as well as Kenner would have hoped, and the cartoon didn't last that long. But it still marked a milestone for the first R-rated franchise to really get a Saturday morning cartoon. I've seen the cartoon. I don't think it's the worst thing ever. I think it's actually pretty decent for the most part. I mean, there are some bad episodes. There are some really bad episodes, but there's a handful of ones that I thought were actually pretty good for what they are. If you're a fan of RoboCop, I'd recommend checking it out sometime. I've reviewed all the episodes on my channel. You can check it out, and I might put a link down below in the description. But if you could just do it, you could search my channel. You could just type in on the search bar RoboCop, the animated series, and you should be able to find the review. I mean, this is definitely a cartoon that was clearly meant for kids, and it's an 80s cartoon. So the animation isn't as great as you might see it nowadays, but for the time it was pretty good. And also, I've seen a lot worse, especially for cartoons based on R-rated franchises, like Rambo: Force of Freedom. I mean, the RoboCop, the animated series, is a lot better than Rambo: The Force of Freedom. I mean, that isn't saying much, but still. And also, when it comes to RoboCop in animated form, I mean, this was 100 times, a billion times better than RoboCop Alpha Commando, which is a film that just makes me want to go commando. I mean, not a film, it's an animated series that I want to go commando on and just take out a fucking minigun and just blow it to fucking smithereens. Pump it full of so much lead that you can't even recognize it, because it has so many holes blown through it. Yeah, you can tell I'm not a fan of Alpha Commando. Fuck that show. That represents the lowest, one of the lowest points in the franchise, and I'll talk more about that later. But yeah, Orion was already starting to show some signs of bringing RoboCop down early on. At first, I felt it was just RoboCop 3 was the start of all of it, but really, it started even earlier, which is really sad. RoboCop really didn't really have that much time at the top, if you think about it. Think about it. I mean, it's amazing this character is so well beloved and so well remembered to this day when you consider its track record for the franchise is not very good. After the first movie, the second film was a financial disappointment and had mixed reviews from critics. And then the third film was a bomb in the box office and with critics. And then you had the series, which lasted for one season, but didn't do that well. It didn't do well enough to get a second season. It was pretty costly for the Canadian production company that made it. You had Alpha Commando, which was a fucking embarrassment that turned RoboCop into Inspector Gadget. Then you had the Prime Directives series, which is another Canadian series that decided to cast a fucking midget as RoboCop, which was a mistake, and had these 4 mini movies that barely connected with each other and were poorly directed. They were amateur hour productions. It felt like RoboCop fan fiction, so, and it was just really, honestly, pretty pathetic. And then on top of all of that, you have the fucking reboot in 2014 with fucking Black Rubber Dildo Cop with RoboCop. So, and you also have bad shitty video games too, like Titus's the last video game that the company that made Superman 64 produced, and it was RoboCop, which was one of the last games ever made with the license. Was this shitty, god-awful abortion that was the RoboCop video game for the Xbox, PlayStation 2, and PC in the 2000s by Titus. So, yeah, it's amazing that this franchise, this character who has endured so much, has been through so much shit, who has been drugged through the fucking depths of a shitty fucking toilet, has managed to survive and managed to still be relevant despite all of this fucking shit that's been thrown at it and at the franchise and at the character. So yeah, so it started early on. Orion was really trying to get every last drop or every last ounce of cash they could possibly get out of RoboCop from the beginning. Now, there were other kind of merchandise that came out around the time. A few T-shirts or novelizations of the first film. There was a novelization of the first film by Ed Naha. There were, of course, things like magazine articles and so on, and then, of course, there was stuff with the Alpha Command. Alpha Commando was later, but Ultra Police. There were stuff for kids with that. There were Halloween costumes. There was, it was pretty heavily marketed. There was a comic book adaptation by Marvel Comics. So there were some merchandising, which is normal. I mean, with a character that is as marketable as RoboCop, it makes sense to market it to an audience that would buy the merchandise. But at the same time, it is kind of crazy when you think about it, because RoboCop is this hard R ultra violent movie with a guy getting blown to pieces and bleeding everywhere out of almost every orifice by the Ed 209 in the boardroom in the beginning of the film. You got a guy who gets toxic waste dumped on him and he melts and gets hit by a car and explodes. You got Morton snorting cocaine off of this woman's tits. You got bitches leave. You got RoboCop stabbing a Boddicker in the neck with a data spike, pulling it out, and there's blood spraying everywhere. I mean, it's a violent, bloody movie with extensive drug use, swearing, and violence. I mean, it is a film that is the absolute antithesis of a kids movie. But for some bizarre reason, teenagers and kids gravitated towards RoboCop. I think maybe they looked at him like he was a superhero. They saw the awesome cover art for the poster or for the videotape. I don't know what it is about RoboCop that just appealed to so many kids at the time, but apparently it did. But whatever appealed to the kids at the time, it was nothing that was meant specifically for them. See, that was the point that Orion missed. Yes, they found out that there was a pretty big audience, a pretty big young audience for RoboCop, but they liked it because it was violent, because it was action-packed, because it had drug use and violence and nudity and all this other crazy shit. In the 80s, kids weren't as sheltered as they are nowadays. Parents actually let kids go see movies that were rated R. I mean, with their friends. I mean, this is the kind of stuff we don't think about nowadays, but it's the kind of stuff that actually went on. So it wasn't that unheard of to have an R-rated film have a pretty sizable young audience, because a lot of parents weren't nearly as sheltered as they are today. There were probably some parents that probably were back then, no doubt, and there were people complaining about Silent Night, Deadly Night around the same time, but still, I mean, there were a lot of parents who just let their kids see whatever they wanted. So it's not that unheard of for kids to discover something like RoboCop, as intense as it is. Now, as the years went on, they tried to, Orion was trying to get other merchandising deals, trying to get other stuff, trying to make it appeal to kids. It didn't work. It was a failure because the Kenner toy line didn't sell as much units as they would have liked, and the cartoon only lasted 13 episodes and didn't do well in terms of the ratings. So here comes 1990, and you have the release of RoboCop 2. Now, before this, the film already had a lot of issues before it even got to the screen. Paul Verhoeven wanted to do the film, but he was obligated and had already signed on to do Total Recall. So he would have liked to have done RoboCop 2, but Orion didn't have the patience to wait for him, which was a mistake, and ultimately they hired Irvin Kershner. Now, Irvin Kershner, he did a great job. I think his directing job in this is fairly underrated, but it's still not Paul Verhoeven, and his presence is definitely missing from this film. The screenplay had issues. Frank Miller had a draft that didn't work, that the studio, the producers didn't feel was filmable, so they had to work around it and edit it and do rewrites and all that kind of stuff. Peter Weller, thankfully, did come back to play the title role of Alex Murphy in RoboCop. And, Nancy Allen came back as Lewis, and there were new additions to the cast. There was a new great villain that was added to the franchise in RoboCane. And Kane was really well played by Monster Squad actor Tom Noonan. And there was other nice little touches too, like Hobb, played by Gabriel Damon, who is this drug-dealing kid. But the film didn't do very well. In fact, it did a lot worse than the first film did. The first film did surprisingly well when it came out. The second film had the biggest budget out of all of the RoboCop films to date at the time, and a pretty big budget for Orion, who were already struggling financially, even in 1990 when the film came out. So they put all their eggs into this RoboCop basket, which makes sense because RoboCop was a really popular film in 1987, and it already made a name for itself. I mean, RoboCop had already become a pretty big part of pop culture. But for some reason, RoboCop 2 underperformed. It was released in the summer. It was released on June 22nd, 1990. It was a film that got mixed reviews from critics. It only made $45.7 million on a $35 million budget. So it did not make enough of a profit for Orion. It didn't help them get out of whatever hole they were in, and now they were in trouble. So they didn't take RoboCop's advice and stay out of trouble. Now they're in trouble. I like RoboCop 2. I've always liked RoboCop 2. I think it's a very underrated sequel. I think there are a lot of aspects about it that are extremely overlooked, like its brilliant satire of PC culture and PC groupthink, with the way how RoboCop has all these directives shoved into his brain, and it messes him up, and he's doing all these stupid things and making all these dumb decisions, but they're all based on these extreme politically correct notions and opinions that people actually have. So there were critics that actually bashed the film for being politically incorrect, which I find hilarious and ironic, because the film itself is trying to satirize political correctness, much like the first film did. And so a lot of the tone, a lot of the elements from the first film are carried over into this, and I don't really agree with the fact that the film has some shit problems with tone. There's a lot of critics who say RoboCop 2 doesn't have the right tone. It has shifts in tone, but I'm like, it has the same tone as the first film. It's the same kind of dark tone as the first movie. Did you feel the first film wasn't all sunshine and rainbows? I like the addition of Hobb as a drug dealing kid. I think that is unique. It's different, and it's ballsy. And I appreciate the balls that the script has to do that, to show us that. And also, I don't get some of the criticism like, oh, Murphy is gone, but there are plenty of scenes that show that he isn't. They just aren't as upfront and center as the scenes in the first film. But there are some effective scenes, like when he tells his wife that they made this to honor him. But there's a lot to like about RoboCop 2. You got RoboCane, the excellent stop-motion animation by Phil Tippett, some of the best I've ever seen on screen and on cinema and on film. The performance by Peter Weller, he's top-notch as RoboCop. And this is the last time also that you get to see the hardcore violence that RoboCop was famous for and was well known for. RoboCop shooting people through the fucking scope, shooting people in the eye through a scope. It's a violent film, much like the first movie. And sadly it's the last time on screen that the true RoboCop is actually seen. This marks the last hurrah, the last ride for RoboCop, because after this it's all downhill, and that's when the fall truly begins. Now, RoboCop 2 underperformed in the box office, but it did pretty decently on home video, so it wasn't a total absolute loss for the company. But it didn't do nearly as well as Orion would have liked. But it does have a decent sized cult following nowadays. There are a lot of fans who actually do appreciate it and do find it to be an underrated film. And I'm not alone when it comes to feeling that way about the movie. So, along with the other film with RoboCop, there were other merchandising and novelization by Ed Naha, a Marvel Comics adaptation of the screenplay. And speaking of Marvel Comics, I want to segue real quickly into a quick discussion of Marvel's RoboCop comics. Now, around the same time that RoboCop 2 came out, Marvel ended up acquiring the licensing for RoboCop. And they ended up issuing a 23-issue series, which started in 1987. I mean, there were two adaptations of the series, of the films, the first movie and the second film, and then the comic book adaptations, the new issues based on the licensing, came out around the same time as RoboCop 2. So there was a Marvel Comics series that was starting to come out. I've read some of them. They're decent. They're all right. I mean, I've seen better. I've read better, but I've read worse. So I mean, the comics are better than anything in Alpha Commando, or any story in RoboCop 3, or any story in Prime Directives, or any story in the fucking reboot. But I definitely would say Dark Horse had some better stories, better comics as a whole than Marvel did. But if you're curious, they're worth a look because there's some decent artwork and there's some pretty solid stories in there regardless. Of course, you also had video games. You had RoboCop 2 for the NES. There was a RoboCop game that also came out for the NES 3 years after the release of the first film. There were some Commodore 64 games that came out before, but really the main, the NES, the first NES RoboCop game came out long after the film came out in theaters. There was an arcade game. There was a pinball machine. So there was a fair amount of video games or game related material for RoboCop. RoboCop 2 also had a dubious marketing ploy where for some reason Orion decided to waste money by having RoboCop show up in WCW at the Capital Punishment. I believe it was the Capital Punishment pay-per-view in 1990. And there was this inane subplot where because Sting was hurt, but he was really popular, so WCW still needed to have him in some kind of storyline. So they had the Four Horsemen kidnap him and lock him in a cage, and this is where RoboCop shows up out of fucking nowhere and then saves Sting. I mean, that is also one of the lowest points in the franchise for the character of RoboCop and for the franchise as a whole. I mean, what was Orion thinking? What was WCW thinking? Like, how does this really promote RoboCop 2? It doesn't. And if anything, it would make you not want to go see the movie because of how fucking corny and awful this appearance by RoboCop is in WCW. I mean, it's just one of those things. It's just like, what? And then you see the film itself is also a pretty violent R-rated movie like the first movie. So, and WCW was kind of, marketed towards kids at the time. So it's like, why are you marketing RoboCop 2 in WCW? Like, what purpose is this serving? And then you had this awkward sort of thing that Peter Weller did around the time where he's doing this just say no to drugs thing, where there was this whole anti-drug sort of thing that was tying in with RoboCop 2. And then the film is heavily focused on drugs and drug use. But of course, RoboCop's trying to stop it, but it's still pretty heavily focused on drugs and drug use. To the point where there's even a drug-addicted robot in the film. So, it's one of those things that just say no to drugs. It says RoboCop, It's just, there was a lot of wasted money in terms of advertising by Orion when it comes to marketing RoboCop 2. Maybe they didn't do the best job marketing it. Maybe a lot of people were turned off of the film because of the WCW thing. I can't blame people for being like, wow, I don't want to see RoboCop 2 now. I mean, that shit was lame. But I have a soft spot for the TV spot though that just came up with this random term that I try to throw in there in reviews or something every now and then, and maximum thrash. Maximum robo, action, robo power, maximum thrash. You're just like, what the fuck does maximum thrash have to do with anything? You were going robo power, robo action, maximum thrash. Is this a 90s grunge term? What the hell? But grunge wasn't really necessarily a thing just then yet. Was this a metal term? What you're trying to? Is the name of a metal band? I don't get it. Maximum thrash. But yeah, RoboCop 2 was a huge disappointment for the company. So this is when Orion decided, well, RoboCop 2 didn't do as well as we would have liked. Maybe it's the R rating that's the problem. And that was essentially the death knell for the franchise. So they decided that maybe we should market the film towards younger audiences. Make this more of a comic book film, a film for kids, Peter Weller wanted nothing to do with RoboCop 3 because Orion was just putting the sequel on the fast track because they needed money. They were in financial ruin pretty much. They were teetering on the brink of bankruptcy, and eventually they would go bankrupt even after the release of RoboCop 3, which actually came out 2 years after it was finished. RoboCop 3 was actually finished in 1991, but it didn't come out until 2 years later. It was shelved. Even as desperate as Orion was at that time in 1991, they didn't think the movie was good enough to release yet. So that says a lot. So they ended up releasing RoboCop 3 finally in 1993, and it was a huge bomb. It was a giant flop. Critically, financially, it was just a absolute rank, stinky turd of a film that plopped into theaters in 1993, in November of 1993, and made $10.5 million on a $22 million budget. Which, when you see the film, it's kind of hard to believe the film actually cost $22 million to make. And it not only pretty much almost effectively killed whatever credibility RoboCop had, especially in theaters, it also killed the career of Fred Decker, who had directed The Monster Squad and Night of the Creeps. Very talented young director. He chose to do RoboCop 3, and he helped write the screenplay. And as much as I love Night of the Creeps and Monster Squad, they didn't do very well financially. So RoboCop 3 flopping was the straw that broke the camel's back when it comes to Fred Decker and his career. And he really hasn't gotten a chance to direct ever since, which is really too bad. But he also helped write this fucking atrocity, so, you know, he definitely does take some of the blame for this. RoboCop 3 is the start of the fall. I mean, you could say there were some signs of it potentially falling in RoboCop 2, but RoboCop 3 really was the start of it all. Peter Weller not returning was a huge blow, and the franchise never really has recovered from that. There have been admirable efforts to fill his helmet and his metal shoes by actors like Richard Eden, but Robert John Burke was not one of those admirable efforts. He delivered a performance that made RoboCop look like he was not only slow in terms of how he moved, but also slow in the head. He made RoboCop look and sound like he was a deaf dumbass. He was a deaf, dumbass robotard. It was just embarrassing to watch. Now, that being said, the film does and always will hold a small special place in my heart because it was the first introduction I ever had to the character of RoboCop. RoboCop 3 is why I love the character as much as I do, because my parents would not let me watch RoboCop and RoboCop 2 yet because they were rated R. So when I was a kid, the only RoboCop film I could see was RoboCop 3. I saw it. I fell in love with the character. My dad even bought me one of the toys for the film that I still have to this day. It's actually one of my most cherished and precious... excuse me. I don't know, I'm just getting a little bit of indigestion because I just know what's coming next. It's just going to get worse and worse. I mean, it just makes me sick to my stomach when I think about how much farther RoboCop has to go into the shitter after RoboCop 3. I mean, this is just the beginning of the descent into the shitter, into the toilet, into the fucking dumpster for this franchise and for this character. So, yeah, I admit it. As a kid, I liked the film. I watched it a lot. But once I discovered RoboCop, once I discovered RoboCop 2, and I saw those films, RoboCop 3 was no longer my favorite RoboCop film, and it definitely wasn't even a good movie anymore. I mean, Robert John Burke is a serious problem because he's terrible. He's a horrible RoboCop. He's a bad actor. I've seen fans do better RoboCop performances than Robert John Burke has in this movie. And they could just be in like a cardboard uniform, a cardboard costume, and they do better jobs than Robert John Burke. The script also sucked. The conflict was shitty. It really didn't do a good job making you give a shit about any of it. The supporting cast was weak. The villain was horrible. Evil Steve Martin, come on now. He looks like Steve Martin. I'm not intimidated by that at all. The whole takeover of OCP was lame. The robot ninja aspect should have been fucking awesome and really cool, but it was the complete opposite. It was a total fail and a joke, just like this film was, and especially RoboCop in this film, because he's spending the majority of the movie falling on his fucking ass and getting his ass kicked. So it was just, and then you have this annoying kid, this annoying girl who named Nico, who can hack into everything, and she even hacked into Ed 209. And okay, it's not already bad enough that we've tarnished the legacy of RoboCop. Well, let's tarnish the legacy of the Ed 209 because she hacks into the Ed 209 and makes him loyal as a puppy. The action sequences, for the most part, are forgettable and shitty and look like something out of a TV movie. And I've actually seen better action sequences in the TV series that would follow RoboCop 3. There are a few things about this film that I thought were at all decent. Those were the jetpack sequence, the score for Basil Poradoris, who comes back to score the franchise, and the scene where the police quit. That's it. That's the only things about the film that I think are remotely decent, and that's not much. For the most part, it's just a lot of cringe, a lot of just pain. Nancy Allen's character Ann Lewis dying in the most half-assed, lame-ass way imaginable that has no impact. The character of RoboCop is, because he's neutered and censored by the PG-13 rating, anything that made him badass, anything that made this character likable is stripped away from him. He doesn't even have his humanity. He doesn't even have the sympathy that you had with Weller's character in the first two films. That's all gone too. Murphy has been completely eliminated from the franchise and from the screenplay and from the story. It's just superhero RoboCop showing up in a toy store aisle near you, complete with all these new accessories. It's just one of those things. It's just such a shallow, shitty film. Absolutely one of the worst sequels ever. It's a shameful sequel because you feel ashamed after you watch it, because you're just like, oh my god, like this is what this franchise has come to. This is what it has become. And if the film isn't bad enough, the video games managed to be even worse. I mean, if you think that couldn't even be possible, it is. Play RoboCop 3 on the Genesis or on the Super Nintendo. Both of those games are fucking ass. They are absolutely some of the most atrocious, horrid video games I've ever played in my life. And I'm not exaggerating that either. And they're right up there with the Titus video game. So, RoboCop hasn't had a nice track record with video games either. Which is, it's like, come on, this is actually a pretty great character to be in a video game. The arcade games are the best so far. The arcade games for RoboCop and RoboCop 2 were really a lot of fun and really well done, and actually did represent the best of the future of law enforcement. The other stuff didn't really represent him that well. Especially not these RoboCop 3 games. So RoboCop 3 was a disappointment for Ryan, and they pretty much went bankrupt pretty soon after the film came out. And you can kind of see why, based on their decisions they were trying to make. I don't know what they were thinking. Why did they think a PG-13 RoboCop was going to work? Earlier, their attempts to do something and try to make kids buy into RoboCop didn't work that well with the Kenner toy line and with the Marvel cartoon. So I don't understand why they wanted to pursue that angle any further and make a PG-13 RoboCop film that has his fucking balls cut off, and now you've lost the main audience that really gave a shit about the character to begin with, and the franchise, and you've also lost the audience, the young audience that actually went and saw RoboCop and RoboCop 2 because of how much of a badass he was, how awesome RoboCop was, how he just kicked ass and took names and fucked people up and shot people in the face and in the balls. You lost that luster. You lost what actually brought people to the character and brought people back to see the character in these films to begin with. You cut it out. You cut out his fucking heart and you cut his fucking balls off. And no wonder it didn't fucking work. Didn't work either in 2014. So, interestingly enough, though, after RoboCop 3, you had RoboCop the series, which, since Orion was in really dire straits and was very close to sinking, they sold the rights to the franchise and to the character to Skyvision Entertainment, which is a Canadian television company, and for like $500,000. And so Skyvision Entertainment produced a RoboCop TV series for syndication. They tried to get Peter Weller to come back on board to play Alex Murphy and the role of RoboCop, but they weren't able to get him on board, so they went with an actor named Richard Eden. Now, Richard Eden is without a doubt one of the brightest spots and one of the best things about this series. And this is one of the things I wanted to discuss that I really didn't do in the previous video, because I'd really not really seen the series. I'd heard about it, saw a few episodes. I knew that RoboCop was doing trick shots and stuff, and it was just a continuing pussification and neutering of the character that I loved. But Richard Eden actually is the closest actor to really emulate and to encapsulate what Peter Weller did, what made his performance so great. Richard Eden was the closest to it. And I think the show is worth revisiting. I think the show is worth watching if you're a fan of the character of RoboCop, if you haven't seen it already, because just for Richard Eden. And it does have some good production values. Each episode cost at least $1 million to make. So the money was definitely on the screen. The pilot episode was based on a script for RoboCop 2 that Michael Miner and Ed Normeyer did that wasn't picked up, called Corporate Wars. And so the pilot was based on that, and it had its moments and things like that. The series as a whole is, in my opinion, average. It's an average live-action TV series. There are some good elements to it. Richard Eden is really quite good as RoboCop. The last actor to put on the helmet that was worth a shit, if you ask me. And the production values are on the screen. The media break segments can be kind of fun. The bits of satire they do have when they have them are entertaining. You also have some decent supporting cast. I mean, mainly with one character in particular. I liked the character played by Yvette Napar. She played Madigan. She was basically Lewis, but I thought she was a decent actress, and I thought she had some good chemistry with Murphy, with Richard Eden. I didn't mind the sort of Ghost in the Machine character either. She was like, it was this woman who was a secretary. She got turned into, pretty much her brain was put inside this system to operate the city and all of that, and something happened, and she pretty much became a ghost that just wound up hanging around in electrical circuits and things like that. And she ends up becoming kind of like a Cortana of sorts to RoboCop before Cortana was a thing with Master Chief and Halo. She was Andrea Roth played the character Diana Powers. There was a villain. There was a cast of villains. I mean, you had Pudface, which was just a really pathetic, lame villain. That's one of the things that really does bring the show down. It had lame villains. Pudface, I know he's inspired by Emil, because there's something to do with toxic waste, but he looks and acts like a low rent Dick Tracy villain. What is RoboCop doing fighting this guy? You had Cliff D. Young, who's a good actor, playing some crazy mad scientist guy. You had a few other people. Roddy Piper had a cameo as a fake Commander Cash, who's a total nut job, which is kind of fun. But it really wasn't much to that character, and he was only in it for like one episode. The villains sucked. So you had conflicts that weren't really that interesting or weren't really that exciting or fun. And then you had the added frustration of what is essentially Nico in the series, with this 9-year-old girl named Gadget who's fucking annoying and didn't need to be in the series, and just further represents that they're missing the fucking point as to the appeal of RoboCop as a character and the franchise as a whole. But there is some interesting stuff, like how RoboCop has become a silent protector for his wife and his son, who are actually present in the series. Some of the strongest episodes of the series deal with that dynamic. There's some interesting sort of things, episodes that have some interesting sort of things going on in terms of the plot. And every now and then there's actually some decent, alright action sequences. The thing is, though, you can tell that this is not the RoboCop that most people fell in love with. This is not the RoboCop that I love. This is not the badass, take no prisoners, fuck you up with an Auto 9 RoboCop. This is the trick-shotting, foam, politically correct, pussified, neutered RoboCop. And, you know, the show has its moments, but it's still not the RoboCop that is the most effective. It's not the most effective model of the character. I think this should have been on HBO or Showtime, and it should have been R or AMA. If it was a TV series that could fully embrace the R-rated roots of the first two films, and one of the main reasons why the franchise was so popular to begin with, it might have lasted a lot longer than one season. But that's not what happened. So after the series, there was just a complete dearth of RoboCop related merchandise, material, anything, stories. I mean, RoboCop the series came out in 94, and that was the last year that Dark Horse released any comics. Dark Horse ended up acquiring the license for RoboCop around the release of RoboCop 3, and they released an adaptation of RoboCop 3, and they started releasing some stories of their own. They were actually pretty well done, and I thought they were pretty good. Mortal Coils, Roulette, Prime Directives was the most well-received one critically, but I'm not a fan of that one because the artwork is shit. But overall, Dark Horse did a pretty good job with the license. But after 94, they couldn't use the license anymore, and there really wasn't anything RoboCop related until 1999, 5 years later, with the debut of the absolutely god-awful pile of garbage that is RoboCop Alpha Commando. Now, this is a cartoon series that I did not really see until years later. I knew of it because I remember the toys, and I didn't want them because I thought they looked stupid. And this is one of the ugliest cartoons I've ever seen in my life. The color design is fucking absolutely an eyesore. It's an eyesore. The color scheme, it just makes me want to puke Dayglow all over the fucking screen. The design of RoboCop is ugly as sin. He looks like he's on fucking steroids and he's got a pinhead. And if that isn't bad enough, for some inane reason unknown to me, you, or anybody, the writers of this shitty cartoon decided, you know what's missing? You know what we really need from a RoboCop series? You know what a RoboCop cartoon needs? We need to have RoboCop have paper towels and toilet paper pop out of his fucking chest, or toothpaste, or fucking rollerblades pop out of his feet, and a parachute pop out of his fucking ass. That's what we need, because Inspector Gadget is popular, so that's what we need to do. We need to turn RoboCop into fucking Inspector Gadget, into a robotic Inspector Gadget clone. I mean, it leaves me speechless. The thought process behind this shit. Were they taking fucking Nuke? Is that why they came up with this fucking stupid idea? So, yeah, I mean, I've seen only a couple episodes of this, and that was enough. I mean, this cartoon it's the cartoon equivalent of fucking AIDS. It's a fucking cancer. Alright? It's a cancerous cartoon. It is. It's like a tumor on the franchise, and I'm like, just cut it off, kill it with fire, kill this shit. I mean, I haven't seen all the episodes of this cartoon, but I mean, even the intro is fucking ass. It's irritating. It's half-assed. There's no effort put into the theme song. It's just constant repeating of RoboCop. It's just the show. I can't even believe this is a thing. I can't even believe it exists. I can't believe it lasted for 20-something episodes. I can't believe that there's some thing called Click Channel or something. It's this... I can't even... It's this, it's like a kind of cable channel or something that people can use with their with their kids. Yeah, it's called Kids Click. It's on Sinclair. It's Kids Click programming block. It's been airing on July 1st of this year. Yeah, of this year. They've been airing RoboCop Alpha Commando to unsuspecting children. I mean, come on. I mean, why would you subject anybody to this shit? Why would you subject kids of today to this fucking cancer? This cancerous fucking cartoon. This shitty, fucking awful, pathetic, atrocious, horrendously horrid cartoon. I mean, this is what RoboCop has become. He's become a fucking joke with toilet paper popping out of his fucking chest or his ass. Might as well use the toilet paper and wrap it around his fucking neck and hang himself. Or maybe he'll pop out a rope and hang himself with it. Put him out of his own fucking misery. I mean, might as well be fucking dead. You might as well be offline. You have to turn him into this fucking pathetic joke with this fucking cartoon. So, like, okay, we got the cartoon, alright? That's gotta be it, right? You know, they can't keep on dragging RoboCop through the fucking shit. They can't keep shoving his head into the fucking shitter. They can't keep doing that, right? No, they do. Because in 2001, we had this miniseries called RoboCop Prime Directives, which was another Canadian-produced series, and it aired on the Sci-Fi Channel in 2001. This is a series I have not seen since I saw it when it first aired in 2001. I remember I was one of its biggest fans at the time, at least before it came out. I was really excited for it. I was looking forward to it. I heard things that it was trying to return back to the dark, violent roots of the first two films, and I was a huge fan of RoboCop. So, excuse me, I'm just thinking about Prime Directives, and of course the fucking reboot that comes afterwards. Fucking RoboCop makes me want to fucking puke. So, I was really excited. And it was one of the biggest disappointments of my life. It was such a big disappointment, such a gigantic letdown that I haven't seen the series since. And someday down the road, maybe I'll see it. Wish me luck if that is the case. Also, definitely pray for me if I ever decide to sit through every episode of Alpha Commando. But RoboCop the series had some good intentions, but really what it ultimately is fucking fan fiction. It's RoboCop fan fiction with a decent budget, but with really not the best people behind it. You got a director who's really shitty, who needs some more seasoning, needed to hire somebody else. It's just pretty bad directing. You have writing that needed an extra screenwriter, some editing, something. You have these stories. There's these 4 feature-length films that, for the most part, are pretty boring and lame because they have these stories that aren't really... There's not really enough there for it to warrant its running time. And then you have just lame shit, like a black RoboCop. There's like this guy who was a police officer named Cable. He gets killed. He gets brought back as a black RoboCop. Oh, and by the way, the guy is also black. It's stupid shit like, it's hammer time. It's like, fuck, come on. Hammer time? Who the fuck do you think you are? MC Hammer? It's hammering time. You got a shitty villain in Bone Machine. This guy who looks like he's a fucking reject from that Black Scorpion TV show that aired around the same time and reruns on the Sci-Fi Channel. Like, who the fuck is this guy? Why is RoboCop fighting some guy called the Bone Machine? So you got the fucking Bone Machine. You got an interesting idea with RoboCop's son being involved with OCP, but it doesn't really go anywhere for the most part. They're pretty wishy-washy on it, if I remember correctly. The action sequences, they're not much. Some of them are okay, but they're still not much. And what makes matters worse is the person underneath the helmet is horribly miscast. Paige Fletcher is great as the hitchhiker on the HBO anthology series. He's not good as Alex Murphy. He's not good as RoboCop. Apparently, the producers of this tried to get Richard Eden, but something fell through and they weren't able to get him, so they had to settle for Paige Fletcher, and it's a pretty skimpy settlement. I mean, it's pretty, you know, and I'm you know, emphasis on the word skimpy, because he's a fucking midget. He's this fucking tiny ass fucking guy. He looks like he's fucking. I mean, he takes his helmet off. He looks like a sad sack. I mean, it's just a really badly miscast role. Paige Fletcher, he tries, but he can't pull it off. He has no intimidating presence. RoboCop is supposed to be intimidating. Like, tons of steel. He's like a walking tank that'll fucking bust your ass. This does not cut it. Because he looks like I could just put my hand on top of his head like Dark Helmet and Spaceballs, and he'll wave around at me, but not really be able to get me, because he's so short. It's like a fucking Cabbage Patch Kid or some shit. I mean, the fuck is this crap? It's like a fucking little kid cosplaying as RoboCop. Why? We got a 5 foot fucking, 5 foot. What? I don't. He's pretty short. You know, little tiny runt, Robo Runt. Come on, this Robo Runt shit out of here. So, yeah, I mean, that was one of the worst things about the series, other than the writing, other than the directing. was Paige Fletcher as RoboCop, aka Robo Runs. So, okay, we have that, right? Can we get any worse than something like that? Oh yeah, we can. We got a fucking video game by Titus, which came out on the Xbox and the PlayStation 2 and the computer and the PC, which is one of the worst video games of all time. Yeah, we got that too. And as far as I think it might be the last film that, not the last film, I mean the last video game based on RoboCop. I mean, you had Frank Miller's RoboCop comic series. You had RoboCop versus Terminator. Okay, you had that. But that was in 92. Then you had a video game in 1993. Oh, and it was actually Capital Combat for WCW, not Capital Punishment. I think that's another... I think that's an ECW pay-per-view. But anyway, you can't blame me. I was close. It pretty much is Capital Punishment. That fucking pay-per-view and that fucking stupid scene. But yeah, RoboCop versus Terminator by Frank Miller. It was a good comic by Dark Horse. The video game on the Genesis and the Super Nintendo is quite fun. The Genesis version I like the most because you can turn on the blood. It's a difficult game, but it's a fun game. It's definitely... any of its problems are nothing compared to the fucking issues with Titus's fucking game. The Titus game came out in 2003. So it came out after Prime Directives. So we already had one steamy turd after another. With Alpha Commando, with Prime Directives. Let's just drop another steamy turd on RoboCop's face while we're at it, huh? He's already in the shitter. It doesn't matter. Put more shit on his fucking helmet. Let's do that with Titus's fucking video game, which I actually sold this game because I didn't really want it in my collection anymore, because I was afraid it was gonna stink up my whole room or corrupt all my other games or some shit. This game definitely does live up to its moniker as one of the worst games ever. At first I thought, oh, it can't be that bad, it's RoboCop. And I was trying to enjoy the game, but each and every time and each and every minute I spent playing this game, it became painfully evident that this is a game that is just absolutely horrible. That this is a shitty game. There's really not any redeeming qualities about this fucking game whatsoever. It's a game where you have these unbelievably long levels and there are no continues. There are no continues. There are no save spots, save spaces, nothing. The map system is fucking useless and it doesn't help. So you have these long ass levels with all these different places you need to go to and different corners and different shit you need to go to, around to, and turn left, turn right, go straight, go down, whatever the fuck. And the map system doesn't help you that much at all. You have some pretty okay graphics for the time, but that doesn't really save it. The decision to make it a first-person shooter was a mistake because the controls are fucking unbelievably bad. I mean, it's when you're controlling this game, it feels like something's wrong with you. You're like, am I disabled? Did this game just kill like half my brain cells and now I can't fucking function properly anymore? No, it's the controls. They're that bad. The voice acting is just an incessant loop of annoying fucking sound bites. I mean, some of them are taken from the film, but other ones are shit that just RoboCop should never be saying. Like, he shoots... I shoot a guy in the head with my Auto 9 with this shitty fucking control system where I have to use the button, the thing that I use to move around. Well, that's also how you aim, and like you got to click on it in order to open up this kind of zoom in mode or whatever. So you shoot somebody. I shoot this guy in the head, and this is what comes out of RoboCop's mouth. Oh yeah! I'm just like, oh yeah! I'm like, What are you, the fucking Kool-Aid man? What the fuck is this shit? It should be more like, oh no. Because, oh no. You're playing this pathetic game. You're playing this garbage heap of a fucking video game. Oh no. So yeah, and then there's these villains. There's these, not necessarily villains, but I mean there's these enemies that are absolutely unpredictable in terms of their level of difficulty. There'll be ones that are easy peasy, shoot them once, doesn't fucking shoot them once and they go down. They go down faster than a fucking hooker. But then there's other ones that show out of nowhere and they're super powerful and kill you in one hit. So it's just like, it's not even consistent. So, I mean, oh god. And the graphics, like I said, they're okay for the time, but it's an ugly looking fucking game. I mean, the design is shit. So, yeah, I mean, this isn't bad enough that you have Prime Directives and Alpha Commando and RoboCop 3 and the TV series that continues to slide into the fucking shitter. You got the fucking video game by Titus. The same dumbasses responsible for Superman 64. So after that, no more video games. I wouldn't be surprised if there were studios who were not willing to touch the character or the franchise with a 10-meter cattle prod. And I don't blame them. It's just one string after shit. One string of shit after shit. Just another shit pile after another shit pile. It's just the franchise is just one giant shit heap at this point, with RoboCop at the bottom of it. Well, apparently, other than the occasional comic by other comic book studios like Dynamite Entertainment or Boom Studios, or the little cameo in Indian in the Cupboard, which is actually around the same time as something like the series, so that was still around the same kind of point of relevance that RoboCop had. The pile of shit wasn't nearly as high on top of RoboCop's shiny head as it is by this point. 2014, we get RoboCop. There's just another... This was the diarrhea dump on top of the shit pile that was on top of RoboCop at this time. I mean, I saw this shit in the theater. I saw this shit in the theater. I saw it in IMAX. It was one of the worst theatrical experiences I've ever had in my life, because I was watching my favorite character get shit and piss thrown all over him on the big screen. I was watching him be disrespected. I was watching him be paraded around like a fucking joke, which I already saw enough of in the previous attempts to try to give the fans something RoboCop related that they could enjoy. I mean, it represents everything I hate about bad movies, lazy, half-assed, fucking reboots that don't add anything new to the franchise, that really don't take them any chances, masquerade themselves as a reboot, but in reality they're a backdoor remake up your fucking ass because of the same fucking plot for the most part, but just done terribly. It's PG-13, which means that the studio didn't learn their fucking lesson from... Well, actually, Orion wasn't the ones that made this. It means that Sony didn't pay fucking attention, didn't even bother to look up the history of this franchise or this character, and clearly didn't give a shit about this character, because if they did, they would have taken the route of Dredd in 2012, which, yeah, wasn't the biggest hit, but it was a big hit on home video and had a lot of fans who really liked it. And RoboCop was heavily inspired by Dredd, so it would have been a nice full circle moment for Dredd to inspire a Dredd film that's good to inspire a RoboCop film that ends up bringing the franchise and the character back to where it belongs, which is near the top of sci-fi action films, not at the fucking bottom where it is right now. It's actually through the bottom. So, no. Instead, we have RoboCop, where fucking Sam Jackson opens the film going, ma 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 ma. He had a fucking seizure or some shit. Joel Kinnaman is a fucking white bread wigger fucking Alex Murphy who's unlikable. So he gets blown up by a car bomb, which isn't nearly as effective or as shocking or as intense or as memorable of a death for Murphy as it was in the first film. PG-13 though, we can't blow his fucking head off or blow his limbs off. We can't do that shit. Why do it anyway? Why have a reboot? Just make a fucking sequel that takes place after the events of RoboCop 3 and make it R. I mean, why not just do that instead of a fucking remake? Michael Keaton, one of my favorite actors, is in this as the villain, but he's just the villain because the script says so. It's a paycheck role. He clearly doesn't look like he gives a shit, and it shows. I don't blame him. Joel Kinnaman, when he becomes RoboCop, his fucking black rubber dildo suit, is absolutely so terrible that it's like he's not even fucking there. He's just, he leaves no presence. He leaves no impact. He might as well just be a fucking empty suit. You have a character who's inspired by Boddicker, who dies in the most forgettable, just bleh, whatever, who gives a fuck way imaginable. The director sucks. Maybe he did some great shit overseas. I don't know. But what's presented here is fucking shitty. The screenplay is an insult to the character with all these just absolutely slap in the face references to the franchise. Like the whole tin can, the Tin Man reference. It might as well be a fucking tin can because that's about how much this fucking movie is worth. No, actually, that's too much. It's fucking worthless. A tin can is worth more than this fucking remake. This fucking reboot. Tin Man reference. This fucking Wizard of Oz music. If I only had a heart. Just like, what the fuck am I watching? Why? I mean, this is as bad, if not even worse than Alpha Commando, because this has a widespread thing. This was on a fucking IMAX screen. This had a worldwide release. And this is the last RoboCop film that's been released in theaters. Is this fucking If I Only Had a Heart. Only had a brain. Yeah, if you only had a brain, you would have actually made a film that doesn't suck. A bag of fucking cocks. And isn't RoboCop in my fucking face and up my fucking ass and down my fucking throat and shooting cum in my eyes that's so fucking big and so fucking intense that it fucking makes me go blind. And that would be a good thing, because then I wouldn't be watching this fucking bullshit anymore. Fucking yodeling in the training sequence. Why the fuck is there yodeling here? Oh, well, that's not a badass training moment. You have a training montage and RoboCop shooting these other robots. This is a shitty scene anyway and a shitty idea. You make it even shittier and something that's extremely hard to watch because it's it's annoying. It was forgettable and just boring and bland, but now it's annoying with the I don't care if it's a classic rock song. It doesn't fucking fit here. The end credits song, I fought the law on the law one. What the fuck are you thinking? Stop smoking nuke. Stop taking nuke. I fought the law and the law won. That doesn't fit with this film and with the theme of the movie. Gary Oldman just there to spout exposition. That's all he's there for. That's all his purpose is. The RoboCop, he's all black. He's fucking butt man, and he looks like a fucking dildo. They're just shoving up your fucking ass. Hey, women can use his vibrating option to pleasure themselves. A lot more useful than whatever purpose he serves in this piece of shit movie. He gets his ass kicked way too easily, falls off a little tiny precipice, loses his fucking arm because he's made out of fucking plastic and rubber. And then there's a half-assed fucking Prime Directives thing at the end, a really lame climax, one of the worst line deliveries of the iconic line, "Dead or alive, you're coming with me," I've ever heard in my life, by Joel Kinnaman near the end of the film. "Dead or alive, you're coming with me." Could you have possibly sounded like you gave even less of a shit as you did here? I don't think it's fucking possible. I think it's impossible. Shoots Michael Keaton, and then then he's back to his fucking gray suit or whatever. Who fucking cares? Fuck RoboCop. So, and that's it. It's been 3 years. Sony and MGM have said things like, "Hey, we're gonna try to bring it back," but have not done anything. I see RoboCop in Goodwills and Big Lots and Walmart $5 bins everywhere I go, which is a painful reminder of where this franchise is, of where this character is on the bottom of this giant, enormous pile of shit with the diarrhea drizzling down all over it into his fucking visor and into his fucking mouth because of RoboCop, which had to come in and dump diarrhea all over an already gigantic pile of fucking shit. Now, why did it fall? I know it's a pretty lengthy video. It's even longer than the other video I did, but I had a lot to say. Why did it fall? Well, it fell because at first Orion clearly just wanted money. They milked RoboCop for all he was worth. They just wanted merchandising money. They just wanted money. That's all they wanted. They saw a popular character. They wanted money out of him. They needed money, so they tried to get everything they could from RoboCop. And as a result, they fucked him over. They neutered him. They took away what made him so iconic, what made him so likable, what made him such a memorable character. And then the cycle continued. People like, the company that worked on Prime Directives tried to reverse that, but failed. And then Sony comes along and repeats the sins of the past with their PG-13 reboot, which clearly misses the fucking point of RoboCop, of the character, why he's popular, what makes him a character that people love to this day, what makes him still a character that still has a pretty lasting legacy despite all of this fucking shit that's been dumped on top of him. The only people that actually have a clue right now as to what makes RoboCop great, what makes the character such a iconic, memorable, unique character, makes him a great character to use for wonderful stories and so on, is Boom Studios, Dynamite Comics. Less Dynamite because they did the fucking awful Terminator vs. RoboCop Kill Human, which is one of the worst comics I've ever read in my life. But Boom Studios, with stuff like RoboCop The Last Stand, they know what makes this character tick. They know what makes him great. So, where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? Obviously, we cannot keep going down this PG-13, pussification, neutered, no balls fucking route that they've done with this character since RoboCop 3. It's just not something that is in this character's DNA, and it's just not right. So, and the fans don't want to see that. So what do we do? I think that either the franchise should remain dead, At least, he's Murphy's had enough shit poured on him already. You know, just let him rest in peace. Each time you bring him back, you dig him up out of his grave, and then you shit on him. Just let him rest in peace. If you're just gonna shit on him again, he's been shit on enough. I mean, dear God, just he went through hell already. He doesn't need to keep going through hell time and time again with these shitty decisions. So, either leave him alone, don't do any more RoboCop films, don't do any RoboCop related anything, and except for maybe a comic series. Or, if you're going to do another film, if you're going to do something like a Netflix miniseries, if you're going to do something like an animated series or a video game, do the right thing. Do the character justice. Respect RoboCop. Understand what makes this character work. What makes this character's gears click. Understand that. Don't try to homogenize this character. Don't try to make him appeal to a wider audience. Focus on the large fan base the character already has and give these fans something to cheer about. Truthfully, go back to the roots of RoboCop. Go back to what made RoboCop RoboCop. What made him go to the heights, made him rise to begin with. Stop doing the things that make him fall deeper and deeper into the fucking shitter. Alright? If you're not going to take it seriously, if you don't have any respect for the character, if all you want to do is throw a film out there or something out there as a quick buck, don't fucking do it. Get the fuck away from the franchise if that's what your plan is. Hire people who are fans of the character, who have been fans of the franchise, and have them do something. Have them be creative. Have them find a way how they can, maybe, I don't know, homage is the right word, but a way that they can respect and honor RoboCop, a character that they love and they adore, but also make a new story with the character. I think a Netflix miniseries would be a great way to go about this. I think specifically an animated series, because a live action series there's more limitations. So something like the Castlevania series that's come out recently on Netflix, I think RoboCop could be a great thing. I think it would be good. That could be a pretty cool show if you had the right people involved. Or something like RoboCop versus Terminator. Animate that. Have Arnold Schwarzenegger and Peter Weller come back and do the voices. That would be awesome. You could even have Peter Weller come back for the RoboCop animated miniseries on Netflix, because Peter Weller's already done voiceover work in The Dark Knight Returns. So bring him back in animation and make it for mature audiences. Bring back that ultra-violence. Bring back the satire. Bring back all of that stuff. The stuff that's missing from everything that's happened post RoboCop 2. I mean, the series had some satire, but it really wasn't the best. Or make a video game, but do it the right way. Don't half-ass it like Titus did. Actually make a good RoboCop video game. Make not only good, make a great RoboCop video game, which serves as a fourth film. These are all great options, in my opinion, to bring the franchise and RoboCop, the character, back to, at least a little bit back to where he once was. At least to pull him out of the shitter. At least get the shit off, wipe the shit off of him, shine him up again, you know, put him out there in a nice light. Because if you're going to bring him back online, you better make it worth it. because he's been brought back online too many times now, and he's just been kicked, shit on, pissed on, cummed on, everything, every possible fucking thing you can think of that could be done to a character or to a franchise has already been done to this franchise. Every possible negative fucking thing. He's been fucked up the ass. He's been all these fucking things. People think Crystal Skull is bad. You know, the South Park episode where, oh, Indy's getting raped by George Lucas. RoboCop's been getting ass fucked by multiple different people ever since RoboCop 3. So, he's definitely one of the, he's honestly one of the most underappreciated and disrespected characters in pop culture, if you think about it, considering everything that's happened to him. The quality of the licensing, the quality of the films that have been made based on the character, the video games. Some of the comic books are good. Most of the video games are shit. Some of them are okay. Most of the films are shit. Post RoboCop 2, even some people think RoboCop 2 is shit. I don't agree with that, but if you feel that way, then it's even worse. So I don't think a feature film, I don't think it's the right time for that. RoboCop came out in 2014. It's only been 3 years. So I think there's going to have to be some time to go by until, there's enough goodwill to really put out another feature film. But a TV miniseries on Netflix, either animated or live action, I'd prefer animated, or a direct-to-video sort of animated movie or something, or a video game. I think those are great options. And if those are successful, then maybe a film. Maybe you could do another RoboCop film and do it justice. But you need to have somebody who's behind the camera and behind the story that's every bit as passionate about the character and about the franchise as Michael Miner, Ed Nuremberg, and Paul Verhoeven were 30 years ago. If you're not going to have that, then don't even bother. But anyway, I don't know what else to say. I've spoken to you guys for over an hour and a half. It's a feature-length video, but it's an epic franchise. It's full of epic fails, but there's some epic wins in there as well. But there's a lot to say about the franchise. There's a lot that's been done. I mean, I might have even forgotten something. So, I mean, there was like a theme park ride at one point in time at some place where you got in like a motorcycle, and it's like, it's a motion capture ride where you're like, not motion capture, but one of those rides where you're like in a chair and it moves around. And this was like RoboCop on a motorcycle in CG. I mean, he had a theme park ride. I mean, he definitely had a pretty big impact on pop culture. But it's really sad, and it really is quite shocking when you look at how far he has fallen since his rise. So anyway, thanks for watching, and as always, I will see you guys later. Thank you for your cooperation. Have a nice day.